Okinixaquax. Hello, my relatives. My name is Natayo Weaselhead. My Blackfeet name is Nitekistikinyak. One spot woman. I do not share my words lightly, but I share them in light and truth. My words and experiences are my own, but these experiences are also shared by so many others. They are the same or similar to the words, stories, and experiences of countless others who have not only suffered from mental, physical, sexual, and spiritual abuse, but also from coercive control, dissociative disorders, sex trafficking, sex slavery, Stockholm Syndrome or battered women syndrome, and many other forms of complex abuse. I see you, and you are not alone. I hope I can find a way to help people understand how complex forms of trauma can distort and even destroy someone's life, and also to know that we have the amazing capacity to generate self-healing and activate our highest potential as powerful, sacred, and sovereign beings. This is not an easy story for me to tell, and it is not an easy story to listen to either. So please be gentle with yourselves, smudge, drink water. Don't be alone if you don't have to be. Take breaks if you need to. And if you're feeling triggered or unsafe, or if you or anyone you know is experiencing any form of abuse, please reach out for help. You are not alone. I will now share some of the struggles I have faced throughout my life. It is not everything about my life, but within the topic of abuse and sexual trauma, these are my experiences. I was born on the Flathead Reservation in northwestern Montana and adopted by a white family who changed my name and raised me outside of my indigenous culture and community and traditions. At 8 years old, I was sexually abused, then silenced by adults, and endured decades of emotional abuse, racism, bullying, and discrimination by so-called family. I had my own big plans for after high school, which came to a standstill when I became pregnant against my wishes. I told my parents about the pregnancy, and within 1 month, I was forced into marriage. The marriage ended 4 years later in extreme abuse, which left me with permanent disabilities, traumatic brain injury, and cervical disc disease. I ended up being too scared to press charges. A few years later, I was raped while on heavy pain medication following an emergency dental surgery. I woke up very confused in a mental fog, and my boyfriend withdrew his genitals from me, which is when I knew I was being sexually assaulted while I slept. I found out that I was pregnant afterwards and was pressured to go through an abortion. Soon after, one of my lungs collapsed 4 times within 1 week. And as soon as I healed, I went with my kids to a women's shelter. From there, I ended up enjoying a year of peace with my kids living in a safe cabin. After returning to my hometown, my youngest daughter died suddenly due to medical negligence. I fought for 2 years, never getting justice for her devastating and preventable death. All I could do was move forward and heal. A couple of years later, I found myself struggling, trying to push myself to begin living again. But without connection to my culture, our traditional teachings, or ceremonies to go to, I felt lost, and my spirit was crushed by grief. I ended up going out to bars, drinking more, and eventually being brought into situations that were dangerous, telling myself that I had control of what was happening. In reality, I was being sex trafficked in person and online by wealthy businessmen from out of state, as well as prominent predators in powerful positions. I would be taken to different locations, put through dehumanizing conditioning, ultimately trained to become an obedient slave for sex. They break your mind and rearrange the pieces, using command words to trigger sexual or submissive behavior, and everything becomes backwards. My body learned sexual pleasure from the worst traumas of my life. It's like my body was betraying me, and it made me hate myself even more. Sex became something I had to do to survive. In order to survive, I would dissociate, sometimes blacking out or completely forgetting memories of what I went through. I told myself everything was okay, this was normal, and I was in control. I attempted to convince myself that I was engaging in sex work to validate the trauma that I was going through. But deep down, I understood that honest sex work wouldn't induce this level of trauma. I convinced myself that it didn't matter if I was raped because it was just me. So I was using substances to numb myself. I was living in fear and fighting suicidal ideation daily. There were times that I was treated so inhumanely that I began to question if I was actually human or if I was something else. I struggled so deeply I began to believe that this was all I was meant for in life, was to serve men and to be used for sex. Eventually, I just hoped that if I could just find someone who didn't hurt me too badly, that maybe I could learn to live this way. But I was so scared, I was just surviving. Photos of me were being exploited and passed around trafficking chat rooms to dangerous men who were requesting things that I have trouble even mentally revisiting to this day. I became terrified of this dark world that seemed inescapable and began trying to find a better way to get myself out and to begin a new life. Without the stability and support of loving family or community ties, I found myself very isolated and continued being brought back in and out of sex trafficking or being raped by men who were supposed to be trusted friends. I was manipulated and controlled for multiple years by one man who I called my handler, who actually told me once that he had chosen me because he loved the way I had been trained, how willing I was to serve, and that he wanted to train me to worship him. He took several videos of me in various sexual situations where I was completely out of it and just following his orders. There were times I tried hard to fight back against this conditioning, to escape the control of these predatory men, and I couldn't understand how certain words or phrases were being used to trigger me, pushing me suddenly to switch right back to slavery. I was still trying to heal throughout it all, going to therapy, holding on to what I had been shown in my dreams and visions, holding on to my ancestors' teachings, looking for any sign that they were with me, guiding me in some way. My ancestors had become my closest family, and I knew that I was alive because of their presence with me. I began to try to meet my Blackfeet community members, elders, and started to learn our Blackfeet language. I wanted to hear the stories, learn the ways of our traditions, culture, and ceremonies. I became sober and began to participate in learning circles online with an elder who encouraged me to use my voice, opening me up to speaking opportunities. I decided to walk away from the oppressive family who had adopted me. I changed my name back to Weaselhead, and in 2021, I connected with an elder who invited me to my first Sundance ceremony, or circle camp, in Browning, Montana. The experience left me feeling so close with the community, seen and supported. I met distant family members, received my Blackfeet name, had my face painted, and I made healthy, healing connections. My prayers were being answered, and I felt strong on my healing path. After Sundance was over, I became connected on Facebook with a tribal leader from the Blackfeet community. A few months later, after I had shown some interest in a project for Seated Strip that he had been working on, he ended up sending me a private message and asking if we could have a phone conversation to discuss an update for Badger 2 medicine. We exchanged numbers and began talking about ideas to get people to support the project. For a few weeks, we started talking and messaging regularly, starting to get to know each other more personally, and eventually he expressed wanting to meet me while he was in town for tribal business. He was such a wonderful man. He lived a sober life, was prayerful, intelligent, active in ceremony, and worked hard for his people. We made plans to meet and ended up eating takeout food at his hotel room and talking for hours into the night, both opening up about our lives, challenges, passions with art, and our families. I felt safe enough to be sexual with him. He was so gentle and seemed very shy. We discussed how important it was for both of us to have a sober relationship, and I was so grateful to be with someone who shared the same values and healing path in life. He continued coming to Missoula from Browning to see me for the first couple of months, and once things became more serious between us, we began opening up about personal struggles and mental health more. Both of us had experienced depression and anxiety in the past, and we shared how we overcame those struggles. I was worried that he would think I was gross because of my history with sex slavery. However, I felt safe enough to open up to him about my sexual traumas and was so impressed with how trauma-informed, gentle, and sensitive he was. I felt lucky to be able to talk with him about it and that he was so open to supporting me as I heal. We talked more during his visits and over the phone about these past traumas, and he wanted to make sure that I always felt safe with him. I told him about the specific words used to trigger me to disassociate and obey predators, and how hard I had worked to get away from that life. I told him that my wires were crossed and how I was trying to heal from all the ways that I had been conditioned to have sexual responses to violence or rape, and heal with loving sexual intimacy and sacred sexuality, but that it was really hard. I opened up about my fantasy of lovemaking, and he wanted to make that come true for me and help me heal in those ways. He told me that none of those awful, disgusting things would ever happen to me again, that I was safe, and how proud he was of my strength for working so hard to heal and return to our Blackfeet way of life. The more we talked about the kind of futures we each wanted, it was easy for us to imagine a life together in a small cabin, and soon we were in love. I felt so blessed to be in a relationship with such an amazing man. I didn't notice when he first began grooming me, pushing my boundaries, or the subtle ways he would make me nervous or agitated around him to keep me on edge, or to always make me feel sorry. I didn't realize that he had stalked me online before we even began talking, or that he had stolen a pair of my underwear from the floor of his hotel room one of the first times that we had visited. He kept our relationship a secret and would only take me to his hotel rooms. He'd begun to learn how to control me with the same triggers and rewards by always asking questions about my past traumas and acting interested in helping me heal. He used the same trigger words in our conversations, throughout text messages, and during sex, keeping me in a dissociated slave state and in survival mode daily. In that traumatized state, I was hypersexual and eager to obey his orders, doing and saying anything he wanted me to, or whatever I knew would make him happy. He wanted to become my new handler or owner, but I didn't want that. I wanted to be his partner. I wanted healthy love. He would say he was kidding, then act supportive again towards my healing. He continued offering help with my healing and told me that I could trust him. I believed him when he told me he wouldn't be the same as those bad men and that he would help me heal. He convinced me to call him sir, suggesting that it could help me heal. I wanted to be safe and for my heart to be taken care of, but I wanted to make him happy too, and he was pushing my boundaries more and more. He had me send him sexy photos and sexting throughout the day and asked me more and more to tell him stories about my past traumas At some point, he stopped responding with love and compassion, and it was clear that my sexual traumas turned him on. So whenever he was bored, he'd ask me to tell him a story. It became his way of fetishizing my traumas. He was pushing me back into survival mode with the triggers and demeaning sexual activity, and before long, he had pushed me past my boundaries for healing and broken me down under his control. During sex, he would always be whispering in my ear, telling me to be good, to call him sir, and to say that he owned me. He told me that he was my handler now. He started telling me that sex was really all I was good for, and that it was better that I served him because he could protect me from other bad men who would hurt me. I repeated everything he wanted me to say. I told him that he deserved to own me and started feeling those old feelings of not being human again. He began using punishments if I failed to perform a task. He told me I needed to be controlled this way so nobody else could control me, to help me. He began asking about my sobriety and if I had any cravings with alcohol. He suggested that if I did want to drink with him so that he could keep me safe. I told him I didn't have any cravings to drink, but agreed to tell him that if I needed support. He began wanting anal sex more and more. I told him how I always fought against it because it hurt so badly, that I didn't like it, and that I would usually end up completely shutting down and dissociating. He wanted to force me to have anal sex and said that it seemed fun, but we'd take it slow. Over time, he continued to escalate. He told me not to disobey him and that I can't say no. He told me that he wanted to get me drunk or tipsy and take advantage of me, later saying that he wanted to get me sloppy drunk so that I was easy for him. He started to push me past my boundaries more and more in order to perform sexually and obey his demands, until it became a normal and constant power dynamic in our relationship. He would tell me that I needed to be forced, and I would agree. He told me that I needed it because otherwise I would be led astray and nothing changes, making me feel like I was a disappointment if I didn't obey. He began sending me large payments of money as a reward after following his orders and completing sexual tasks, telling me, "Good girls get rewards," and eventually began sending hundreds of dollars for me to purchase sex toys. He had ideas for me to start playing video games and doing gaming commentary, telling me how sexy I would be and that I could probably bring in revenue. Then he would come up with ideas to sell me online to horny gamers. He continued to ask me for my input and ideas on different things, like how to punish me or control me or how to sell me online. So I would agree, trying to be helpful and happy. He would put me on a pedestal as a sex object and then tear me down and become incredibly cruel, treating me like I was disgusting and disappointing. At this point, I was struggling inside to make sense of everything and also to just survive what was happening. He was still doing such remarkable things in his community and was so loved by the Blackfeet people. Still spoke about praying for guidance and was still attending ceremonies with elders. He didn't hit me. He didn't want to cage me or hurt me all the time. So he wasn't like the predators I considered dangerous. But he was doing things that were bad. And I didn't want people to know that their leader was doing bad things. I didn't want people to find out. I knew it would be hurtful in so many ways. And yet I could still see the good in him. I saw him working for good things, and we wanted such a beautiful life together. It was all so confusing, and I didn't understand how I had gotten so far from the healing path with such a beloved leader and man of ceremony. I started questioning if maybe I was meant to be controlled by him since I had been conditioned to be raped and to serve predators in power, and he had this darker side to him. I thought that maybe this was the best life someone like me could have, and maybe I was lucky he wanted me. I tried to convince myself by telling myself that at least I would still be able to learn the ways of our Blackfeet traditions. He could teach me about Blackfeet symbols and art, and we could attend ceremonies, live the life we both dreamed of. I started believing that I deserved to be treated this way, but I still didn't want to be treated too badly or to be hurt. So I was very obedient and compliant in order to survive all of the sexual, emotional, and spiritual abuse that he was putting me through. Once he pushed me past my boundaries with anal sex for the first time, he was very open about enjoying me in the dissociated slave state and wanting me to beg and cry. He began planning to take me on his tribal business trips. He wanted me to be there to serve him while he was working. He told me that he was going to use me, that he wanted me to be in my slave state all the time, and wanted me to tell him how. I was already dissociated from the constant manipulations, so I told him how to keep me dissociated for days by basically doing the same things he was already doing. I told him what sex traffickers did to train me, and I told him I would do anything he wanted. He had manipulated me into participating in my own abuse this way and rewarded me for behaving and being helpful. He had me looking up cages to put me in, or different phone trackers that he could install on my phone, and sex toys to punish me with. It was my job to be everything he wanted me to be, and once he figured out that I had been a sex slave, that was what he wanted. He told me it was who I am, to just be myself, and he would be himself too. No more healing, no more love stories. By this time, I felt like I had no choice. I was becoming more and more trapped within this abusive and controlling dynamic, and was operating in survival mode. He was telling me repetitively that this was all I was good for, that I was just a whore and a good slut, and telling me that other men would rape me if I was bad, that he would keep me safe, that he was helping me, and that I needed to be good and accept this life. He told me I needed to be raped and controlled. I would agree completely and tell him that I needed it, that he was right, and that I deserved to be raped. And I actually believed him. He rewarded me for repeating these things and for obeying all of his orders. I was fighting suicidal ideation again after a week-long tribal business trip to Gila River Reservation in Arizona, where anal rape and punishments became routine. He kept me a secret so that nobody knew I was in his hotel room, and over the duration of the entire trip, I was raped 7 times, 4 in Idaho and 3 in Gila River. While we were in Gila River, I spent a day going hungry while he went out to eat with other tribal leaders to a fancy steakhouse, ordering expensive meals. He was cruel towards me, then suddenly nice, and began to anally rape me every morning and night. He started repeating terrible things in my ears, like that he owns me, or that I can't say no, to be good, or that all I am is a whore, then having me repeat these things. I would cry, begging him to stop, saying no, and would try to get away as he anally raped me. But he would tell me to just be good and take it. The pain was too intense for my body to handle, so I would dissociate or just shut down. He started telling me that the Creator had made me for him, and this is what I was meant for, and I believed him. He started a fight the entire 2-day trip back to Montana and told me what a disappointment I was. He had completely broken down my boundaries and my spirit and turned me back into the traumatized version of myself I had worked so hard to heal from. I felt so broken by the sexual abuse and all of his manipulations, and I was fooled by his trickster deceptions. He took me on several business trips paid for by the tribe. keeping me in hotels, raping me routinely. Once I began trying to leave the relationship, he started showing up in Missoula and leaving work early, driving from Browning to punish and rape me. Overall, I was anally raped 20 times in 3 different states: Arizona, Idaho, and Montana. During a conversation over text, he admitted to manipulating me throughout our entire relationship in order to gain control and to recreate my sexual traumas. He told me he kept pushing me further and further to see what he could do to me, and was pushing me away from others to isolate me and stop me from interacting with others so that I would stop going to things like sweat lodge ceremony. He told me how he started arguments, made me uncomfortable, then began to use triggers and rewards to control me. He told me how he knew I didn't like certain things, like anal sex, and made sure to always do that because he knew that it hurt me, and he knew that it kept me dissociated in my slave state, so I was easy to control. He wanted my pain, shame, and humiliation to remind me of him every day, and taunted me, saying that it was easy, like clockwork. He laughed, saying that I fell for it, and that he wasn't done yet. I agreed with him, telling him how smart he was, and how I had no idea he had manipulated me all of this time. He told me how he had stalked me before we had started talking, how he stole a pair of my underwear, and how he knew right away that he could make me his sex slave. He told me how he started learning about my history being trafficked and always asked questions to learn more, saying that he knew he could make me his slave, and telling me that there was no way I wouldn't become his slave, that I had a lifetime of it and needed to accept it. He told me his plans to keep me hidden from others, locked up in a cage with my mouth gagged, and that all I was meant for was to serve him, be used, to cook and clean. He told me about his plans to sell me and have other men rape me. He told me that if I tried to get away, I would just be returned to him, that he would put a GPS tracker on me, or always have somebody find me. He told me how he would find somebody else to do all of this to if I didn't work out. I told him that he deserved to have control over me, that I was devoted to him, and I started to believe that if I didn't stay and let him rape me, that he really would just go out and rape somebody else. I was scared about everything that he was saying, and I started feeling more and more trapped. I was too scared to try to stand up to him yet. It was unpredictable territory. So I told him it all made me love him more and how devoted I was to him. He kept bragging about what he had done, telling me he knew right away when he met me that I would be a perfect fit and how easy it would be to make me his toy. I told him how shocked and confused I was. I thought he was really trying to help me heal and that he had said I was safe. I thought he was going to tell me it was all a joke or that he was playing around, but he said no, that it was not a game and that it never was. He said that I didn't have a choice, I had to take it, that other men still hunt for me and that he would protect me. We were partners, but really owner and property. That not many others out there would treat me so good. He continued manipulating me, pushing me to accept it all, so I did. And eventually he asked me, "Aren't you going to thank me?" So I did. I thanked him, praised him for being so smart, and told him everything he wanted to hear me say. I felt so defeated, like being a slave was the only thing I would ever be in this life, and I was completely freaked out by everything he had confessed to. My spirit was breaking more and more. I was suicidal, scared of what he was capable of, and I felt so ashamed of myself. He sent me money to have me buy new sex toys, and he was going to take me on another tribal business trip. That was the first time I drank alcohol with him, and he was pressuring me to go beyond my limits. The abuse and aggression was escalating. He was saying terrible things in my ear and having me repeat them again, telling me that I deserved this and needed it, that I was bad and needed to listen and be good. I agreed and told him that I deserved it and I would listen. He began slapping me, using sex toys that hurt me. I blacked out from the alcohol very quickly and remember flashes of being slapped harder, then coming back to consciousness while he was anally raping me. He covered my face with a pillow when I would beg him to stop, crying, "Please no," and eventually blacking out again from the intense pain. I was coming back to consciousness again as he was bouncing me on the toilet. I can remember the blood coming out of my anus and my legs shaking from the pain as he helped me into the shower to clean the evidence of rape off of my body. He told me the next morning how out of control I was, how I was puking and angry, and how he had to slap me to keep me quiet. He talked about needing to go to therapy and left the hotel for a couple hours before we left Missoula to travel to Browning and then go to Billings for his meetings. On the drive, he talked about the Unabomber, wondering how he had avoided getting caught for so long, and he was curious about what kind of supplies the Unabomber kept, how often he would go to town, or what time of day he would light fires, and on and on. The rape continued in Billings, and the things he would say in my ear during rape were becoming more and more intense. He would grab my body parts and say that he owns them, or telling me that I don't get to leave, and that I'm his slave and always will be. When he was gone, he would tell me he was bored with his meetings and wanted to leave work early to take me to dinner. He took me out to Red Lobster, and while we were there eating, there was another tribal leader who ended up sitting down in the booth directly to the left of me. I was instructed through text to discreetly leave the restaurant before the other tribal leader saw me with him, and told to go wait in the car. I felt so invisible, like a shameful secret. I remember that night in the hotel, we watched the movie Wonder Woman. I was watching her strength, wishing I could be courageous just like her. I heard our Blackfeet language being spoken by the Napi warrior, Jean Braverock, and it was like something inside of me woke up. For the first time, I wanted to break this abusive cycle. By now, he wanted me to feel sore from the anal rape and express satisfaction from it. He continued asking me for details of my past, wanting to know what I thought of him. He felt like a freak, and I tried to reassure him and tell him that he was a good man. I wanted to escape him, but I also wanted to be good, to serve him, and I didn't want him to get into trouble. I was struggling, feeling so scared of what he would do, and feeling like I deserved it all. I was so dissociated and still in love with him, yet so scared of him more and more. I felt like he hated me. He would put me on a pedestal, praising me for being his slave, then rip me down so low, making me feel disgusting and worthless. He had me constantly doing sexual favors for him, taking photos and sending videos, spending hundreds of dollars on sex toys and outfits. I wanted to make him happy with me so I would try to make the videos as good as possible. I tried to ask for balance in the relationship, or to do some regular healthy activities like date night, watching a movie, or trying to create a positive connection together. But it would cause him to start a fight that would become so disorienting, I would finally give up and I would end up apologizing. He became more and more cruel, trying to persuade me to go out to bars to get drunk and be raped, going over sick fantasies of me getting gang raped, and persistently telling me that he was looking for another man to rape me with him. He would talk to me like we were a team, working together to abuse me. He started calling the bad or disobedient part of me, Ruby, and telling me to give him ideas on how we were going to punish Ruby, or threatening me, saying that Ruby was going to get it. Then the good, helpful, and obedient part of me, he would call Secret Agent Miley, because he knew that I loved singing with Miley Cyrus, and I would listen to her album Plastic Hearts all the time. Something about it just really resonated. He started to force me to message my old handler, the man who had controlled me years previously. He wanted me to get old sex videos that the handler had kept of me, and he acted like we were on a secret mission to get those videos. So he was really nice to me, and he would call me Secret Agent Miley. It was like we were a team, so I was willing to help him because it felt so good to be treated kindly. But really, he just wanted to get the videos of this other man having sex with me while I was dissociated and being controlled. I had no idea how many videos the handler had of me, but the handler mentioned that he had a favorite video that was really long. So my abuser became obsessed with getting that video, and it became a mission for Secret Agent Miley that continued for several weeks. It also became a way for my abuser to completely shatter my identity. So there was this bad part of me, Ruby, that needed to be punished and deserved to be hurt, caged, controlled, and raped. And then there was this good part of me, super awesome Secret Agent Miley, that was treated really well and was rewarded with what he called nice nights for being so obedient and helpful, and who was always really sexy and wild. It's hard to describe how disorienting this kind of psychological abuse was to endure. But all I know is that I was doing everything that I had to do to survive, and I am here today. I know that I am whole, I am worthy of kindness, and that I am not deserving of any form of abuse. I was still trying to escape. However, psychological abuse is extremely complex and very difficult to overcome alone. My attempts to leave him and to stop the abuse were resulting in more aggressive rapes and an increase in control and his constant demands. He was threatening to put a phone tracker app on my phone that eventually started a long, draining fight with me, ending with me being so defeated that I surrendered to the phone tracking app and to being under constant surveillance and scrutiny. He would have me take screenshots of my messages with other men and screenshots of my location whenever I went anywhere. I was trying to be good, but there was no end to being sexualized, demeaned, manipulated, coerced, and broken down. I went back and forth, fighting him, telling him that he couldn't do these things anymore, or he couldn't control or re-traumatize me anymore, and he would back off for a little while. He'd start apologizing, calling it a silly game, saying that he'd never do it again, then eventually manipulate me until I was apologizing, then punish me for being bad, escalating the abuse. When I would finally give up, it would go back to the abusive dynamic, and he would come to Missoula to rape me or take me on another business trip, threatening me and training me not to disobey or leave him again. The things he was saying in my ear while raping me became more and more twisted. It was hard to know what to believe anymore. I was bleeding more and more from the rapes, and he would tell me how good I was doing, that he needed to teach me and I needed to just take it, that I can't say no. He wanted to condition me to want to be raped, like I had been before, and told me that my pussy was too good not to share. I felt so betrayed by my own body, knowing that I had still had sexual responses to violence and rape from being conditioned in sex trafficking. I told him again that my wires are crossed, and he said that he was glad for it. I told him that I thought I had Stockholm Syndrome. I felt that way because I was helping him enslave and abuse me, and I still loved him. I felt protective of him, but I still wanted to escape. When I told him, he laughed, telling me thank you, He seemed proud of the control that he had over my psychological state of obedience. He was becoming more manic and fixated on raping me with other men. He talked about selling my underwear online and selling me. He wanted to get me drunk and have me raped by other men and get it recorded so that he could watch. He said he knew I would try to run, but that he'd catch me, and talked about raping me in his field on his land, telling me it's going to happen. The repetitive anal rape was causing bleeding and anal fissures, and he found great enjoyment in how much it hurt me. He told me he wanted to make me feel a bit of shame and pain, but he would love me for it and make me kiss him. He would taunt me, joking about my injuries, asking me, "How's your ass?" while he knew I was at sweat lodge ceremony, never letting me forget his power even while I was in a spiritual ceremony. I had to hide the abuse and my injuries from everyone there. This kind of wicked physical and spiritual abuse caused me to stop going to sweat lodge for a long time because I felt so disgusting, like I didn't belong in a spiritual setting. After another fight and attempt at trying to leave the relationship, he convinced me to talk and work things out together. He drove from Browning to pick me up at my house and told me that he has a wolf inside, like a monster, but that he was trying to get better, and he was sorry. He took me to his hotel, and I told him I wanted things to be nice, and he said yes, he would be nice. And I said that I didn't like the wolf, I didn't like the monster. He told me that I needed to behave then. And I said, I know. He said I needed to stop blocking him online and that I was being bad, and I started to apologize. He asked me if I was going to be good for him. He started taking my clothes off, and I was too scared to try to stop him. I repeated what he said. He told me things like, "You can never escape. You need to listen. Stop trying to get away. It will only get worse. I'm trying to help you, but you keep being bad." He was grabbing my throat, choking me from on top of me, and it was so intense. At one point, I got really upset, and I yelled at him, "No more wolf." And I pushed his shoulder, trying to get him off of me. He became angry and manipulated me until I was apologizing to him over and over. He began to rape me and pin me down, covering my mouth as I cried. He took out his phone and began playing the sex videos that he had me get from the old handler. And he held my face still to force me to watch the videos while he anally raped me. He told me I needed to take it and that other men would rape me whether I wanted it or not. I was bleeding and my legs were shaking so badly. I could barely walk when he helped me to the bathroom and got me into the shower to clean me off. The next morning, I was too afraid to try to say no. He raped me again before we left the hotel, and he took me home. He returned to the Blackfeet reservation, and the next day he went to deliver a speech for a high school graduation, then went to work and met with the U.S. Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland. Meanwhile, I was completely invisible and recovering from brutal wounds from anal rape. When we were talking over text about the rape the next day, he began saying we messed around pretty good, and I agreed, saying that he was training me hard. He asked me what I learned, so I told him the threats I very clearly remembered, that I needed to obey him always, that I needed to behave, that I'll be raped by other men whether I want it or not, and that it will only be worse if I disobey or try to escape him again. He told me that I was smart and was glad we sorted it out. I was terrified. I began going to therapy and reaching out to elders, making a plan to safely escape the relationship. It took me several weeks to build up my courage, but with the help of ceremonial leaders and one badass auntie, I was able to stand up to him and finally end this destructive cycle of abuse. I am free, I am free, I am free. Once I felt strong enough, I reached out for legal help. The investigation for these sexual assaults was started in July 2022 by Detective Connie Bruckner. It has been an incredibly draining and frustrating process. Since it is a complex psychological case, it's been very difficult for investigators and prosecutors to process and comprehend. Although they're doing their best, I've had to sit through a lot of meetings where I listen to their explanations that sound more like victim blaming or comparing trauma and rape to BDSM. He was finally interviewed by an FBI agent in July 2023. Again, the investigation started in July 2022, so it was a year after the investigation began. I was finally able to get a lifetime order of protection approved by a judge around the same time, and he did not appear to that hearing. It's been over a year and a half since the investigation began, and still no justice. I have had to deal with ongoing physical injuries from the anal rape. I suffered anal tearing during rape that started January to May 2022. And was then trying to heal the extremely painful anal fissures that lasted from May until October of 2022. I spent a lot of that time suicidal, knowing that he wanted the pain of my wounds to always make me think of him. I am still healing from issues from those fissures today and have to see a colorectal specialist. At this point, I will possibly need surgery to correct the damage that was done. It is something that has been horrifying, humiliating, and it is a way that his sadistic sexual violence continues to violate me on a daily basis. It has been really hard healing from the spiritual abuse that took place. It has been hard to trust anyone from this community because of his threats of finding other men to rape me. It has been difficult to feel safe again whenever people even just say the word safe or tell me that they want to help me. It felt like such a huge betrayal to have a tribal leader turn me away from our spiritual way of life and healing in order to take advantage of my sexual traumas for his own gratification. He just became the worst kind of colonized oppressor that Indigenous women have been fighting for centuries. Nobody deserves this. I am worthy of good health and healing. I am sacred. My life matters. I have been silenced for too long, waiting for the time to raise my voice and bring to light what was done in darkness. There has been a lack of public awareness and transparency for this investigation, and I believe people should know what is going on. I believe that the Blackfeet community should know who their leader is, and I believe that women should know the predators within their community. There has been no media attention since no charges have been pressed. There has been no accountability from the Blackfeet Tribal Business Council, and they will not make a statement until there are charges pressed. The detective leading the investigation was challenged with an incredibly difficult case and has recently retired while the case remains open. Missoula County prosecutors Brielle Londe and Ryan Mickelson have not pressed any charges, letting a predator remain in power. There are too many predators in power in our Indigenous communities. Change must start now. I am calling on warrior women who will stand with me as I bring this to light, and higher conscious men who will stand in support of their sisters. I'm calling on Blackfeet community members who want transparency and accountability to be upheld for their leaders. I'm calling on the Blackfeet Tribal Business Council to uphold their oath of office for any council members who are committing predatory acts on tribal councils' time and financial expense. I'm calling on government leaders such as U.S. Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland and spiritual leaders who know and sit in ceremony with this well-praised predator. He is the vice chairman of the Blackfeet tribe, Lauren Monroe Jr., Human Wolf. I am calling on all of you to use your voices, to stand up with me for a call to action towards justice, calling on the courage of our ancestors to do what is right, to answer the call for ending violence against our sacred women now. I sincerely hope that as a community, we can come together and use this as an example to do better. We have work to do. Thank you.